9th of July, 27.
Yeah.
27. Comes along for my graduation in 1945. I decided that maybe I didn't want to get drafted because they were drafting people at that time. So before I turned 18 in July, and I graduated in 1945 in June
From Frewsburg High
from
School?
Frewsburg High School, and I decided I didn't want to get drafted, so I decided to join the Navy. That wasn't quite as exciting as going into the Army. I have an uncle who was a doctor, and I had thought maybe I'd become a doctor someday, so which I didn't. But so I decided to join the Navy and go into Corp School. The boot camp at the end of June, first part of July.
And the boot camp was in Samson?
In Samson Naval Base, and I was in boot camp, and lo and behold, on August 15th, I think it was, the war ended. They dropped the atomic bomb, and the war ended. So I was already in the Navy, and of course, I was going to go to Corp School out in San Diego, which I did. As far as the boot camp goes, we learned how to march and swim and do a lot of things that I probably wouldn't have done living in Frewsburg.
The Japanese have accepted our terms fully. That's the word we've just received from the White House in Washington.
They gave us a day off that day, and we all come out, and they had an announcement, and everybody, there were a lot of people. It was still a boot camp when the war ended, and there were probably 5,000 or 6,000 people in Samson at that time. I don't know how many, but there were a lot of people, and they all got us out onto the parade ground, and it was quite an exciting time to think that the war was over now, and we wouldn't be going all over as much as we would have if the war had been going on. As soon as I got done with boot camp, I think it was in late September, I took a troop train to San Diego. It was a 5-day trip. There were 800 people on the troop train, 800 guys, and it was an interesting trip because I'd never done much traveling before, and so I got a chance to travel across the country. And
well, what's some of the highlights? I mean, just if you had to, I know you did a letter back to your parents about it, so as you're traveling.
Well, it was all exciting for me. It was a new experience, and we got to Chicago, and we went right into the train. Excuse me. You better get me a glass of water. We drove right into the stockyards, and the stockyards were still going strong at that time in Chicago. So I remember seeing out of the train window when we were there all the loads and loads or trainloads of cattle being brought into Chicago to the stockyards. And so we, I better take a think. So that was kind of an interesting experience that I'd never had before, of course. And then we went on through the rest of the country, went through Colorado and through the mountains, and it was all pretty exciting to me. And we saw a lot of ranchers out there, and then we got into California. We went down through Los Angeles and San Diego, and I think it was about a 5-day trip. Then I went to Corp School in San Diego for about 10 weeks, I guess it was, because right about Christmas time, we didn't know where we were going to end up. We went to Corp School, and we knew it would be a hospital someplace. We weren't sure where. And the Corp School at that time was located in the San Diego Zoo, part of the zoo. So we stayed right in the barracks that they had there, and we were right near the zoo. And so I got any free time, we got the chance to wander around a little bit. And then when we finished boot camp, or finished Corp School,
By the way, when they refer to Corp School for the camera, what's that really mean?
Well, it's connected with the hospital. It's a medical. It's a medical term. The corpsmen that were during the war, and I thought maybe that's what would happen. I'd be sent over to Pacific because the war was still going on when I first joined, but I thought, well, that would be an exciting part of my experience. So if the war had ended, chances are I would have gone with a medical unit to the Far East. But as it turned out, they needed all the help they needed here because the fellows were coming back from the Pacific at that time, and the naval hospital that I came back to was where I had gone to boot camp, which was Samson. It was a Samson medical center that had been converted. And so I was there all of 1940, most of 1946. And then in the fall of 1946, I got transferred to St. Albans Naval Hospital in Long Island. So I was down there for about 4 months. And then in February of 1947, I got discharged. It would be like a nurse's training now, I guess. We learned how to give shots, and we learned how to adjust somebody if they had broken their leg or something, and there were all kinds of things that we had to learn when we were in Corp School, and it was pretty interesting time actually. I learned a lot about how to deal with people and how to meet people who were laid up, and it was an interesting experience. And when we got back to Samson, of course, there were a lot of people. That turned out to be a TB hospital at that time. And so there were a lot of people in fact, I was assigned to a quarter there that had, I think it was mostly officers who had been injured or wounded during the war. And so I had a lot of chances to talk to a lot of interesting people at that time.
Was the trauma, or whether it was physical, mental, otherwise?
Well, I think it was both. Most of them were in there because they'd been injured in some way. However, they all had tough experiences, most of them, and a lot of them wouldn't talk about it. So you couldn't find out too much because that was something they didn't want to talk about too much. Several of the officers that I worked with, or that were in the hospital at the time, had been in the Far East for quite a while, and had come back. And there were a couple of them, I guess, had been in European war too. But the war was ended, and they were so happy to be back in this country, of course. And I was too, because I knew that I wouldn't be staying in the service all my life. And after I got discharged, I come back to the States, and lo and behold, it was in February, and the JCC, it wasn't JCC at that time, it was Alfred Extension. And so I got started, my first semester started in February of 1947. All the while we were going to school, of course, he had been appointed to the Supreme Court, and it was quite a thing for the village of Frewsburg to have that. And Harold wrote to him, or was in contact with him, to come and speak at our graduation, and he had agreed to do it. And then I don't know when it was, probably in April or May, is when he got assigned to Nuremberg. So he sent a letter to Harold saying that he wasn't going to be able. I think the Jackson Center has a copy of that letter. And yeah, Harold and I were good friends, and we went all through school together. So he went to Europe after his boot camp and or training, and he was in Europe when the trail was going on, I guess, and he had experience of having Bob Jackson send for him and came to the. So he sat in on the trial, I guess, or was there when the trial took place. So that was pretty exciting, and it was exciting for us too that lived here because I knew Harold real well, and the whole thing was an interesting experience. And as a result, I got eligible for the GI Bill, so I went on from there. And I graduated from Alfred in 1951, and so that was my experience. I guess I was fortunate to not get more involved than I was.
But thank you. We salute you for everything you did at your time. Thank you.